Is Javier Milei actually capable of saving Argentina? Is his plan working or not? What is it that people say? How are things going over there? Guys, welcome to the channel, and specifically for this kind of content, if you're interested in learning about survival preparedness from the economic aspect, an economic crisis, collapse, I strongly recommend that you get street survival skills as well as surviving the economic collapse based on my experience of going through just that in Argentina. As you see, it is still affecting the country, and let's look into what they have to say regarding Javier Milei and what he's been up to. Now, this is from Bloomberg, which is usually kind of okay. There are a few little things that we have to explain that the legacy media conveniently forgets, but mostly it is pretty accurate, especially for analyzing the situation.
President of Argentina in a radical political gamble, and the aftershock is now in full swing. Milei took office in December 2023 and believes his aggressive and controversial austerity measures are key to lifting Argentina out of a decades-long cycle of economic boom and bust. And he knows it's going to hurt.
De corto plazo vamos a tener sufrimiento, pero después vamos a salir.
Close to half of Argentina's 46 million citizens live in poverty. Inflation is among the world's highest at an annual rate of 260%. And a sixth recession in a decade took hold at the start of the year.
This is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of thing that you need context. This woman, they are all the same. They're like copy-pasted. They're pathetic. This is a kind of leftist, far-left communist, Che Guevara kind of Marxist. These are downright far-left communists and Marxists. As you see, they have the Che Guevara, Ernesto Che Guevara, like Cuban communism. These are the people that ruled the country for decades. They were the government, and now that they're the government no more, they take to the streets and want to install this message of everything is terrible, everything is a disaster, while they were in government stealing, robbing, looting the entire country. They had no problem whatsoever. They said not a single word was being said about the disaster. Now that they're no longer in government, it is enough. We can't live like this. This is all terrible. They are the worst kind of people in the planet. But hey, yeah, don't let Bloomberg explain these things.
Cada vez más la miseria en la calle. Pasar a pagar un transporte de 100, 120 pesos a pagar uno de 700.
All of these are the justicialistas, far left, quebracho, very Che Guevara-esque like leftists of the worst. These are not even like center-right or center-left. No, these are far-left lunatics and basically corrupt, horrible people that are the main. These are the ones that are responsible for the state in which the country is in. And since they have no shame whatsoever, the day they lose, the day they can no longer steal elections, they take to the streets and install this idea of everything is terrible, he has to go, right? Yeah, you probably know these guys in the United States as well.
Despite the hardships associated with his fiscal reforms, Milei is not your typical politician and enjoys rock star status. So what's propping up his popularity? And when will the electorate know if their gamble will pay off?
Milei kind of came out of the blue. He had only been in politics for 2 years as a national congressman. Argentines took a bet on someone completely new, that even in his discourse, filled with yelling and expletives, he captured the ire that they themselves were feeling at everyday life.
And perhaps understandably, Argentina's the largest economy in Latin America after Brazil and Mexico, but it spent a third of the last 70 years in recession. It defaulted on its international sovereign debt 3 times since 2001. Runaway inflation and a devalued currency prompted the central bank to introduce bigger and bigger banknotes to help shoppers needing to carry increasingly large stacks of cash around.
Yeah, this is way more Republic kind of thing, printing bigger and bigger bills.
We are in a huge crisis, but also we have a very important opportunity because we have things that the world needs. We have oil.
She's trying to say world, but her English is that terrible.
As lithium commodities. So maybe it is an opportunity to find our model of economic development.
Milei planned on finding that model. He started by stripping away government subsidies of public utilities, from electricity and gas to water and public transportation. This has had a big impact on people's wallets. In December 2023, an average household in the Buenos Aires metro area would pay about 30,000 pesos for public services. That bill has soared in the months since then.
Low and middle class households who previously had to pay next to nothing, about 5% for the actual cost of electricity, are now having to pay between 20 and 30% of the real cost of that electricity.
Still subsidized to the point where you're paying only 20%. I mean, I remember paying 150 of natural gas for heating in winter in Buenos Aires per month. Per month, $1.50. That is a coffee. Not even a coffee these days. But I remember thinking that this is crazy. But it's subsidized to that point for the people that probably don't even need it, because I could definitely pay more than that. Now, it was cheaper for me, but for someone that is very poor and hasn't got even the grid to count on, maybe living in the outskirts, and they required bottled natural gas for heating, those guys were paying 50, 100 times what I was paying, because it was not subsidized for them.
This had real financial consequences for people like Mónica Pérez. She owns a carniceria in a working-class neighborhood outside of Buenos Aires.
Lady Carniceria, Bloomberg Originals. It's a butcher. We say it's butcher in English. Carniceria is butcher in Spanish, okay?
Yes. But she says she stands by her vote for Milei.
Me encanta que no sea ese político tradicional.
Some of the poorest people are the ones that voted for Javier Milei the most. Some of the poorest people are the ones that voted for the guy that said things are going to be a lot worse for a while before they get better. And that is very encouraging, and that gives me a lot of, it's even a sense of pride, the idea that even the poorest people of the country, the ones that were suffering the most, they still voted for the guy that said the only way out of this is not more left-wing communist agenda. It is capitalism and free market and the option of growing based on reality instead of lies.
Nos acostumbramos a pagar la luz 2 monedas, el gas 2 monedas, y ahora él vino a sacar todo eso, que a mí me parece bien, pero también hay que recuperar los sueldos.
Milei also cut real spending on pensions, social security, public wages, and education, and halved the number of ministries in government.
Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Educación, afuera, 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 afuera.
It was all part of Milei's rock and roll campaign promise to take a chainsaw to public spending.
Milei reduced spending on public works in real terms 90% compared with the first 3 months of 2023. That includes everything from hospitals and schools to train stations, bridges, and even hydroelectric dams, no matter how far along they were.
Sí, está buenísimo.
Esto es un edificio de una...
The idea was very simple, is you have to live within your means. The phrase of Milei is no hay plata, there's no money, so stop. No, but we need for schools, there's no money, we don't have any, there's no money, we can't keep printing money if there's not any. And that's been his battle cry throughout all of this.
Una obra pública. Hace 6 meses que lo tenemos terminado el edificio. Todavía no lo podemos entregar. Como no se reactivó la obra pública, no certifican, no pagan, no podemos hacer la entrega.
Juan Pablo Rudoni owns Ecosan, a modular construction company that works on both private and public infrastructure projects. Since Milei came to power, he says government contracts have been completely frozen.
La verdad que la expectativa no iba a ser tan duro el ajuste, que no íbamos a tener un...
Anyone working with the government in Argentina, these guys are all They all are in it. You don't get a single contract of anything in Argentina with the government if you're not paying them in one way or another. So these are usually, as sad as it is, these people are also part of the problem, because the bribes, it's standardized. Any contract you have with the Argentine government up until Milei, it is 5%, 10%, 50%, 20% bribe. So you overprice 50, 60%, 100%, whatever, because that's how it works. And it is terrible for the economy.
Parate absoluto de lo que fuera obra pública es parte del costo que todos estamos dispuestos a asumir para tener una Argentina normalizada y con proyecto de futuro.
He's not alone in his optimism. Milei came to power with nearly 56% of the vote, and he's mostly retained that popularity.
Different polls show different numbers, but for the most part, he remains above 50%. This is really high approval rating for someone who's taken such unpopular measures. One of the main reasons that Milei remains so popular is that there's still a lot of anger toward everyone that came before him.
There's plenty of anger when it comes to Milei's politics as well. He's right-wing and a self-described libertarian who's quite literally embraced Donald Trump and his political rhetoric. He condemned abortion, advocated for the free trade of human organs, and cozied up with far-right leaders.
Free trade. There's things that he said out of context, or you say sometimes stupid. Yes, you're not going to be selling your organs and kids, and but what she was saying before about the anger, we now learned about the former president, the leftist president that was before Javier Milei. He would beat up his wife. He's a wife beater. The guy that wrapped himself up around the human rights and LGBT and women's rights. He actually beat the shit out of his wife. A complete scumbag. We now see pictures, and there's lawsuits ongoing. So that's why people are still so fucking mad with everything that was before Javier Milei. And given that he's completely different from that, with all of his issues, which he has many of course, but it is still a massive wave of negativity that was left behind by the previous administration.
Billionaires across the world.
La política de Milei solamente favorecen a grandes grupos económicos en relación a los trabajadores.
And here you have a fucking grown-ass man with a ring in his lip, and he's a typical commie. He's a typical leftist, useless air breather that is just there to get money out of the government and just find a way to steal from people. Sindicato. These are all some of the worst people in the planet. These are the people that allowed the looting of the country for so long.
But as for whether Milei's austerity measures are working, it really depends on where you look. When he took office, monthly inflation spiked to 25% after his government scrapped price controls and devalued the currency. But it slowed since then, reaching this 2-year low in July.
And that is very important.
This is what matters. This means that eventually, sooner or later, probably sooner than later at this point, this is the big, massive hit. This is what Javier Milei was honest about. Like, when he was running for president, he said, things are going to be a lot worse. I'm going to do things that are going to hurt. It's going to be very bad, especially at first. But then we will reach the point of equilibrium where we will not spend more than what we have, and that will level the books. That will make things fair once and for all.
And because inflation affects people not only in material terms, also in psychological terms, okay? For someone going to the supermarket and seeing that a product had the same price as the last week, well, that has a psychological impact that is very, very important.
The government also now spends less than it receives in tax revenue. That's notable for a nation that in 2001, during a brutal recession, went through 5 presidents in 2 weeks and defaulted on a record $95 billion of foreign debt.
We haven't seen this level of sustained fiscal surplus since 2008. It's a country that has always spent way more than it has, which is one of the key culprits behind runaway inflation.
Some critics say that the onset of a fiscal surplus is simply the result of one-time cost-cutting measures. In the first 3 months of 2024, the economy fell into another recession. Consumer spending and manufacturing tanked in the wake of Milei's austerity measures, and tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. Salaries for those in the formal sector have failed to keep pace with prices, and it's worse for informal workers, who are paid under the table and make up almost half of the total workforce in the country. In June, Argentina's Congress approved a sweeping bill that grants Milei emergency executive powers, privatizes a number of public companies, makes it easier for employers to fire workers, and provides tax breaks for foreign investments in key sectors.
These are the things where you need, this is the gray area. This is where it gets tricky. Like, should you privatize everything? No, I mean, we tried that. This was a time in which they privatized everything with a lot of bribes, just giving away national resources. And you know what? I mean, the only ones that benefited were some of these foreign investors and the politicians that sold the country. So you want to have a private enterprise, you want to have capitalism, but capitalism is not corruption. If you're corrupt, it's not capitalism, it's you just being corrupt. We know that you have corruption both on the right wing and the left wing. It doesn't matter. It's not that just privatizing everything is some kind of solution. If you do it right, if it makes sense, if it's something that can be done so in a way that benefits the parties involved, fantastic. You always want a private enterprise, especially when someone can benefit from that, and mostly people can benefit from that. But if it's only going to be the politician that fills its pockets by looting the country, then that's not the point.
Like mining.
It's really important for investors because it's a test of whether or not Milei can get congressional approval to back his ideas. It's one of the biggest challenges that he faces because Milei is sort of a one-man party. There's no one else.
In 2025, midterm elections will reveal whether Milei's measures and the hardship they've meant for those who gambled on his presidency pay off.
Yo creo que tenemos un gran potencial de crecimiento. Tenemos que pasar el invierno, tenemos que pasar esta mala temporada.
Obvio que tengo esperanzas, tengo fe, creo. Tiene que cambiar, va a cambiar para bien. Ya está viniendo el cambio con Milei, se nota.
So there it is, guys. So we are still waiting. It's still very early. You need years. You don't fix a country that was a disaster for almost 80, 90 years in just a few months or a couple years. You need a lot more time than that. You need an entire generation of people that do things differently. The people that are now understanding that this is the way in which you should do things. You don't spend more than what you have. You don't steal. You're not looting your own country. And when it comes to how you manage your own resources and minerals and mining and a private enterprise, as long as there's fair rules and as long as you're not allowing foreign investors or people within the country to abuse the system and steal. And with lithium, right, can you use that as a way of growing the country? Yes, you can. Mining lithium is going to be super profitable, right? Oil, gold, whatever it is you want to have, sure, as long as you do it correctly, as long as it's not done by corrupt politicians and corrupt business in a way that, for example, pollutes all of the pollutes the rivers, abuses people, right? Lithium mining is great, yeah, sure, but maybe in Africa when you have child labor involved, yeah, maybe it's not all that great. Oh, but we can do it responsibly. We can do it in a professional manner with proper jobs and people with the right conditions. Yeah, sure, that sounds fantastic. That's how things are done. The right way. There's no other mystery here. Guys, it's going to be all for now. See you on the next video. Take care.